Hi, my name's Tom, and I want to talk about bounded applicability of the methods we use today. Now, this is going to be relevant for you if you are someone who's working in, say, modern product tech companies, trying to start up something new, particularly, but just in general, if work terms like OKRs, outcomes, agile, product trios, product management, if these all are familiar to you, then this video is for you. And I've been having so many conversations recently with people, interesting people in the sort of product and tech space, where I keep referring back to this diagram that I've made. And I thought, let's share this more widely. So bear with me. There's a few little steps along the way, but I'm going to try and keep this quick and high level and just get this idea so you can start playing with it. So where did I start? We all know, I think, mostly, that there is no one size fits all process. There is no right process that we can use universally. But that opens up a problem for us. Like, well, how do we know? How do we know when we are not in a situation where we can use a certain process? And how do we know when we're in a situation where we should absolutely use a certain process? As it stands at the moment, we don't seem to know this because there's lots of holy wars and fighting about, well, this is the right way. No, this is the right way. You're wrong, and people having fights. And it's really stressful at the moment. And so I just want to say that I love you all. You're all right, that your method is brilliant in the right situation. And you're mostly all wrong, that your method has more applicability than you think it does. It's worked for you, that's fantastic. But other people are in a different situation. It might not work for them. And that's okay. It doesn't hurt your method. It doesn't hurt your success for that to be the case. So I want to share a little bit about how I think about, well, when is something going to work and when is it not? Along the way, I'm going to have a little dig at OKRs. Not really. I love you. In the right situation, you are the best thing ever. In the wrong situation, really not helpful. And we're going to look at what some of those situations might be. And I'm going to share a little sort of high level idea about what to do about it. But then I'm going to tell you now, I want to hear from you. I'm looking to talk with people about these ideas, to shape this more, and to see if I can, if these ideas can help to shape things in companies, to unblock some of the mess that I think we are struggling with. I don't know. It's a test. Let's see how it goes. So first, I'm going to warn you, get this out of the way. We're going to touch on Cynefin. Now, you may have come across this before, or you may have not. It's not always shared in a way that is generative and helpful. I'm going to say that I have found it extremely helpful, but it comes from a particular unlock, a particular concept that's layered on top of Cynefin that made it much more powerful for me. We're going to start with a quick reminder of Cynefin, just in case you haven't come across it or you've come across a much older version. I'm just going to go over the high level point, but then we're going to mainly spend time on the dynamics. And that's where it unlocked the power for me. And we're going to look at what that means for different sorts of movement within those dynamics and how that applies to bounded applicability of methods. It also highlights a few places where we might just be missing methods entirely. I see many teams in many companies not really considering methods that are outside of the purview of what they're used to, what the industry treats as standard. And there may be some opportunities there. And I'm going to try my best to make it practical. And again, I want to have conversations with you. Please reach out to me through the website and we can book something in. So moving on, let's start with Cynefin. You may have seen something like this before. One of the common mistakes is calling it quadrants. There's not 4 quadrants. It's not a 2x2. It is there's a loop and then a little line. And what you're really looking at here is on the right-hand side of the map, you've got ordered systems. And on the left-hand side of the map, you've got disordered systems or complex and chaotic. I've added in 3 phases of matter as well here, because that's one of the metaphors that I think can help to explain how Cynefin actually works, how it helps us. If you imagine a solid, it's very rigid. All of the atoms are connected together in ways that makes its behavior quite predictable. It's not going to slosh around or float away. It's going to sit where you put it. You can stack things together. You can build an engine out of it, that sort of thing. When it's a liquid, you've got it's different behaviors. The atoms are still connected, but it's more fluid. It's less predictable. You can get whirlpools, waves, eddies. It will change shape to fit a container that it's in, and then change shape again, and it's not predictable. And then finally, you've got gas. In a gas, all of the atoms are completely disconnected. You've no longer got connections between the atoms. They're floating around, and it's completely it's a different state of matter entirely, a different phase. I don't want to hear about Bose-Einstein condensates there and other exotic phases of matter. We're just worrying about these for now. The other point that's important is in that AC little point in the middle. That could be considered like the triple point of the phases, where it's equiprobable that something can be liquid, solid, or gas. So that sense of different kinds of phases of matter might help. The other way to think about this is in the complex domain, you're dealing with complex adaptive systems. This is the world of people working with each other, where they're not predictable like a machine, where if you set something in motion, people might change what they think and do and how they handle things in order to resist or double down, etc., etc. On the other side, complicated, that's more the world of machinery and repeatable, predictable processes, which we can keep doing and they'll keep giving us the same result. In complexity, you'll never get the same result twice. The situation changes, and every time you do something, it's a different situation. So you're not going to get the same result over and over again. In the complicated domain, though, you can. Another little metaphor to look at this, in the complicated or in the ordered domain, it's perhaps more like a car engine, something like that. If a car engine is broken, you can take it to an experienced mechanic. They can figure out what's wrong with it. They can take it apart and put it back together, and they can make it work. In the complex domain, perhaps it's more like a squirrel. If something's wrong with a squirrel, you can't take it to someone who'll take it apart and put it back together again and figure out exactly what's wrong with it. It's much more, you then don't have a living squirrel for sure anymore. And it's much more about dynamic changing systems. It's not fundamentally managing them is different. It's a very different set of tools you need than if you're working in the ordered domain. Or another way of putting it is, people are not like computers. They're not like engines. People are different, and especially groups of people have completely different ways of interacting. Chaos is something that, in general, we don't have to deal with as often. It's a very difficult state to maintain in human systems because we abhor it, and we will get away from that as quickly as possible by putting constraints into place. And humans are very good at taking the complex and bringing it under control, making it more ordered. This is what a business is to begin with. We take messy patterns in the market and we find a way to make our way of making money out of those patterns more predictable, more scalable, more repeatable. And this is where businesses start to grow. That's a quick high-level overview. There's a load more reading. There's loads more metaphors that you could go into if you want to. Fundamentally, though, it suggests there are different ways to operate in the different domains. So in complicated, well, clear, we'll understand that people love best practice. Best practice is only relevant in the clear domain when it's really obvious what something is, like a light switch. Best practice, if you want the light to come on, is to flick the switch and the light will come on. Fantastic. Similar to turn it off. Complicated. You can't have best practice in complicated because there's too much going on. It's very much situationally dependent. It is much more about sense, analyze, respond, figure out what's going on, analyze so you can make a plan, do the plan. And that, if we're taking the light switch through, that might be the realm of the electricity substation and the engineers who use those massive capacitors and massive great resistors and make the electricity substations operate well. In that case, when something breaks, like the car engine, they can sense and analyze, take a look at the situation, figure out what's going wrong, come up with a solution, fix it. Root cause analysis, fantastic in this space. That's all well and good. Then we move on to complex, and we move into the world of probe, sense, and respond. Now, there really can't be best or good practice. You're in the world of emerging practice or exaptive, emergent and exaptive practice. You're borrowing from other places, figuring out what works in the first place. This perhaps might be more the world, continue our electricity analogy, more the world of energy markets, where it's about lots and lots of different entities all interacting with a market in real time and changing as things change and figuring stuff out, and where stuff happens that's unpredictable. And you can't look at the market, analyze it, make a clear plan for exactly what's going to happen and what you need to do for the next 6 months, and then just stick to that. Now, you have to respond as the market responds, because as things change, everyone else is responding too. This is much more the world of humans and much more the world of, a lot of stuff to do with customers, understanding the market, the world outside our company, the world that's changing and shifting, that is not predictable, that will react differently when you do the same thing, which is quite fun. And then the chaotic, this is continuing the electricity analogy, this is the world of the emergency. Well, when the power goes out, suddenly we have to scramble, we have to act, then sense and respond. So you'll first act to fix things and get the power back on, and then you'll take another look and see, well, do we need to shore up the power stations? Was this to do with something in the market? How are we going to change the way that we operate? But the first thing you need to do is get the power back on. You can't do anything else until you've moved out of that chaotic zone. And the final place that's really important is the middle bit, that aporetic and confused. And the idea here is, if you don't know which domain you're operating in for a given element of a project or a piece of work, an initiative, then you can either do that knowingly. You would say, hey, do you know what? We don't know. Let's figure it out. That's aporetic, which is an old Greek word for this sort of embracing of confusion as a path to something better. Like Niels Bohr said, oh, good, a paradox. Now finally we can make progress. It forces you to think in a different way rather than doing the same old stuff you've done before, which isn't working. Or if you're operating in a way that is inappropriate for the domain that you're in, you think you're in a different domain, you're trying to use pretty classically very ordered domain stuff to manage complexity, then you could be said to be in the confused domain. You're doing the wrong things and probably causing more problems. You're at risk of tipping over into chaos. So that's a high level of Cynefin. But what makes this really exciting is when we start to see the dynamics. This was the unlock for me, is realizing that what we're doing as humans in general is following a few different dynamic patterns of how we work with different aspects of the world overlaid on the Cynefin framework, which is a sense-making framework. It's a framework for helping us to see the world in different ways so that we can act differently in it. That's all it is. And the line here, the blue line, is the one that is what startups and product companies are trying to do. This is, we're going to move into complex, find novel ideas, novel product ideas, novel behavior patterns in the user base, and we're going to bring them through the liminal complex green zone, capture them, bring them through that zone, and make them ordered, and make them start to become something that we can make predictable, repeatable. We can take our first 10 customers and we can then scale to 100, 1,000, 1,000,000, and we can then scale it, and we can make this huge. And sometimes, as we're scaling things, we can then carry them down that blue line into clear. We can make them just fully stable and safe and working at scale. So that's that blue line. That's nice to do. We'll come back to that in a minute because it's really quite important. The purple line is known as chaos grazing. And this is the world of improvisation and really the sort of innovators who tinker and can get something going, like these weird experiments going, but they're never able to get them across the line and start to make them scalable. It's the the consultant who can absolutely come up with brilliant ideas on the fly or work with a range of different companies to come up with novel ideas, but none of them can then be taken and repeated with another company because it's always figured out on the fly. It's always responding to that particular situation. But that's the essence of complexity. And then finally, you've got this red line, and really the important point, if you remember that middle aporetic domain, when there's the little squiggly gamma line, what we often need to do when we're in product companies is come to that point so that we can decide, well, where are we going to go next? Of the work that we need to do, how can we decompose it and figure out when we want to take that red line, which we'll talk about in a minute, when do we want to take that blue line, and when do we maybe want to stick with things in complicated? You know, if we've got a plan where there's a clear, like building a house type situation, well, let's do that. Now, the red line is when we're going to take what's called a shallow dive into chaos. So we're going to go and use methods that are relevant for that, but you want to get wisdom of crowds type effect. You want to break apart, for instance, in product, your customer base, and you're talking to individuals one at a time to see what sort of patterns might be there, what patterns might be emerging from the space, which you can then travel around, bring back onto your blue line. Great. So now let's overlay some methods and some ideas. So these are the different domains. We've got the complicated domain, the liminal complex, the complex, and chaos. And I think that the way to operate within each of those domains is overlaid on the map now. Now, here's the fun bit. Your whole organization is not in one of these domains. Your organization and your plans, your goals, your hopes, your dreams, they span all of these domains. There are different elements of what you need to work on which sit in each of these spaces. And that's okay. You can work with that as long as you're aware that it's happening, as long as you are able to say, do you know what, we can cope with working in different ways when it's appropriate to work in different ways. And it might change the way that you think about managing a little bit, but like I've seen it, it's not that hard. So where do we get to with this? In the complicated domain, solution-oriented is great, coming up with a brilliant idea and making it happen. And you know it's going to work because it's predictable, because it's ordered, because you can take a part of an engine and take an engine apart and play with it, figure it out, make it better within the constraints you've got, and you can do something like that. The liminal complex, that's where we can be outcome oriented. We have constrained the complex world enough that we know an outcome that we want to go after. And we don't know all the details yet, but we can figure it out. We can point at that outcome and we can go, right, let's find out the final pieces that can hopefully make that something ordered that we can then scale, that we can then do massively. The complex zone, that's where we need to manage for emergence. And this is something that I think is often overlooked, and this might be a novel idea to you. If it's not, great. But here's where we're looking for what's popping up, what's happening already that we could harness, that we could try to energize more, make more of, and we could then maybe see if we can capture that through the liminal complex, outcome-oriented world, and make that something more solution-oriented and scalable. And then shallow dive to chaos, we talked about that. That might be go and learn more about the market without having a clear idea about where you want to go next. You're letting go of your specific outcomes you're interested in, and now you're looking for many, many more potential outcomes that might be possible, which you can then play with to see what emergence happens. I'm hinting now at some of the stuff that is going to come next, but now we're going to get to the busy slide where we're layering on lots and lots of methods. Bosh. Right, so in red, there's a bunch of methods that you might recognize and some that you might not. Now, if you're in modern products, if you're in tech companies, that sort of thing, the top of that little diagram there, that's where you'll be particularly familiar with how things work. And it's outcome oriented. It is, let's set our team's goals or OKRs, and then have them do A/B testing, continuous discovery, work in product trios to figure out the solutions to help us get that outcome to happen. It's the world of OKRs, it's the world of Scrum and Agile. And do you know what? When you've got a clear outcome that is available to you with just a little bit of tweaking, a little bit of work, then it can be excellent. Like, this way of working is fantastic. It's often at odds with some of the rest of the organization, some of the more traditional businesses, where they are used to things being more predictable, more ordered, slower moving, where you have to make bigger plans. And this is the world of waterfall, and where you can have requirements and estimates, and you need to make a big plan and do project management and bring lots of pieces together and make sure they fit because it's fundamentally ordered. The pieces aren't going to react to one another and change midway through the process and make it completely unmanageable. You're able to make that plan and have it happen. Is where you can optimize your processes because they're pretty stable. They're happy. You're good. You're making money and you want to keep that going. Now we know with the best will in the world that companies with those stable processes are operating within a market that is not stable, that has a lot of uncertainty. As JP Castlin, my friend, likes to say, shift happens. The market will shift, and then maybe those processes that you have invested in optimizing and making stable, maybe they start not to work very well anymore. Maybe you're reaching the end of your S-curve. What we then often see is companies starting to panic and look for new ideas, new ways that they could make value propositions, new ways that they could find new processes that will generate money and keep the company alive. What they typically then reach to is, well, hey, let's go and work with our product teams, do it and set them some OKRs, and we'll define a vision. And this is great if you're already in the liminal complex zone. But that's not all of the blue arrow. We're missing a huge chunk of what goes on in that blue arrow. Well, that's okay because we can use our researchers, and researchers are brilliant. We can go out and do ethnographic research. We can go and do contextual inquiry. We can go and talk to lots of individual people in the market and spot new patterns, new things that might be chances for us to build new processes on top of. Fantastic. But you can see already on this map, there's a gap. There's a big gap. And there's a gap between the shallow dive into chaos and the outcome-oriented zone where it's got that big label, manage for emergence. Because here's the problem with ethnographic research. I've been there. I've done it. I've been the person who's there, right, the company's struggling. We need to think of something new. We need to find a new opportunity. And we went and talked to a bunch of potential customers, talked to the market. What we found we found ideas. We found plenty of ideas. That wasn't the problem. We found too many ideas. We found so many ideas that we didn't know how to narrow them down. And we were also aware that when we guessed at which ideas were going to have growth potential, we tended to get it wrong because there are a lot of potential ideas out there. And figuring out which ones are actually going to grow, it's a different job from guessing at one and having a go at it. And that's where we move into this world of manage for emergence. And it's a fundamentally different way of operating for a lot of teams. It is not doing things properly and at scale, and it's not doing all the stuff we're comfortable with. Although we can get comfortable with it. I've worked with teams now who have got comfortable with exactly this sort of stuff. But some of the methods that are in there might be familiar to people. Probe, sense, and respond. This is the world of, I would say, pivot triggers that I've developed. I'll say more about that in a second. Excitingly at the top is the world of SGRM framework, which is a strategy framework which encourages to manage the evolutionary potential of the present rather than trying to manage towards a specific goal in the future. It's a completely different way of thinking about strategy and has been catching on very quickly. And as I've heard reports back, people saying, management teams saying this is the first time in 10 years I feel we've actually got a strategy. And I've had some interesting conversations with people about the limits of vision and OKRs when they are working in this space where there's too many possibilities and we can't comfortably set a vision. We can't see that many steps into the future because we know things are not going to work out the way that we plan. What do? Do you just take a big punt, or do you play it a different way? And I think I'm encouraging play it a different way. There's an idea, there's prototype trios. Instead of trying to guess what people should make and then scale that up prematurely, the idea with prototype trios, this is another thing that I've stolen directly from Dave Snowden, credit to him. You take a couple of people from your organization and you pair them with a user from the market, and you do that across multiple trios. It works better for bigger companies who can afford to invest people doing this, but you have them just prototype cool stuff that the user likes, and the prototyper and you want a young, energetic prototyper and a cynical systems person from your company, so that you can play with different ideas which don't have to work at scale yet. They only have to work for that user and do something cool for that user. There are other methods you can then use to further mutate those ideas, creating more variety. At this stage, you're looking for variety. You want to find more ideas and then spot the ones that start to show that they are, spot the emergence. You're looking for the ones that look exciting, that look like they have potential to go somewhere. You're unlikely to be able to guess them sitting inside your walls, doing another workshop with post-it notes. It's probably not going to happen. Instead, you need to get out into the market. That's where pitch provocations come in. I'm giving some conference talks this year about pitch provocations, which is sort of my version of how to do a much lighter weight way of probing the market to get a sense of where emergence might be happening. And it can be a little bit more comfortable for product organizations. It's quite a cheap way to get started. And I'll be sharing more about that later. It's also the world of, I think, small bets and the ability to say, well, do you know, we can't know which of these ideas will work. But if we can act more like a VC or a venture studio, and if we can structure the way of working and structure our teams such that we can make 100 small bets this year instead of trying to figure out the 3 big rocks, for instance. If we can structure things like that, then all we need is for some of those bets to pay off, some of those bets to start showing signs of growth, and then we can bring them into our outcome-oriented zone. So overall, I'm not saying the OKRs are bad. I'm not saying that vision is bad. I'm saying they have bounded applicability. And I think where things go wrong for you, your product team, your product organization, your startup, is that you're trying to use the liminal complex methods when you're very deep into complexity. You're trying to maybe jump directly from your shallow dive into chaos ethnographic research and then just guess at the vision that's going to be the next big thing. And if you've tried that a bunch of times, you've probably found that it doesn't really work and it keeps crashing and burning. And that's frustrating. And I would say if you're at that point and you're willing to try something new, then please do get in touch. Talk about this with me. Let's jam on some ideas and have some fun. Final thing I wanted to say, I did mention pivot triggers. Now, pivot triggers, I will be explicit here. That is, it's a methodology that I've developed over time, and it really is designed for disrupting people who are too far onto the ordered zone, who want to be solution oriented and keep taking big risks because they're trying to be solution oriented when they need to manage for emergence or need to be more outcome oriented. It can be hard to make that shift. Pivot triggers is a way to start helping people to make that change. It's not the be all and end all. It's not the final answer. What it does do for teams is it kind of tricks you. It's not really tricking, but it gives you the license, the space, and the tooling potentially to go and do some shallow dives into chaos, to go and manage a bit for emergence, but in a lightweight and safe way, where you're still looking like you're doing the type of thing that your organization tolerates and thinks is good. So that's a lot of kind of philosophy there. I want to let you know, really, there is a lot of practical stuff behind all of this. And these things are like, they're out there. People are doing all of these things and they are working. So question for you. I know there's a lot of information, a big download. I want to know what was interesting about that for you. What made any light bulbs go on for you? What is still really confusing? Where do you disagree? Where do you think I'm completely wrong about this? What have I got wrong? And what methods can you think of that fit into here? What methods do you see differently today? As I say, get in touch. I love working on these puzzles. I'm looking to talk with more people about this and develop this kind of framing even further. So with that, I thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. and I look forward to hearing from you.